Up+Adam.
Tractor systems are offline.
We are Beyond FM.
Beyond FM.
The future of broadcasting is here.
Up+Adam with Adam Montiel. It's community content from Concentrate. It's Up+Adam with Adam Montiel.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Yes, some say life is just where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
Happy Thursday, and thank you for being Up+Adam. My name is Adam Montiel. Almost made it through the week. Today's show, I was so pumped to get this guy on the show because he has been an incredible writer, investigative journalist for like 30-something years. And you go back to the stories that he's broken, you're like, I know that one, I know that one, I know that where, I know his work there. I mean, it's crazy. Sometimes the most terrifying stories, they're not about the monster, they're about the people who looked the other way. Today, we're going to be sitting down with Rolling Stone investigative journalist Paul Solotaroff, host of The Devil's Quarry, a chilling podcast that uncovers a decades-long nightmare in Putnam County, New York. Now, what started as the wrongful conviction of two teenagers for the murder of a 12-year-old girl became something far, far darker. A story of a predator hiding in plain sight, a community that had trusted the wrong people, and a system that kind of protected them for years. But this conversation, I'm telling you, it goes way deeper than true crime. Paul and I talk about why human beings are so desperate for closure that sometimes we get and accept the wrong answer just to end the questions. Like, what's with that? We explore the danger of certainty, the cost of chasing justice, and the moment this story stopped being an investigation and became a mission. I mean, there's sometimes these investigative journalists, and we need more of them. They get to a point where they're seeking and they're doing journalistic things, and then all of a sudden they uncover something, and then they just get pissed off. And they're just like, no, we need to expose this. So with the man at the center of this case, potentially returning to freedom, The Devil's Quarry isn't just a show. It's like a warning. This conversation coming up with Paul, I am super stoked on. I got a grip of different headlines today, ranging from all over the place, local to Supreme Court stuff coming in, earthquakes all over the world. My God, this one, a new California gun law hasn't taken effect yet, but it's already headed to court. A lawsuit has been filed against the state after Governor Newsom signed legislation that would ban the sale and transfer of certain Glock and Glock-style handguns. That ban would begin on January 1st. Now, even if you don't follow guns closely, this isn't some obscure firearm owned by a handful of enthusiasts. Glocks are widely considered the most popular handguns anywhere. They're used by millions of civilians, countless law enforcement agencies, and have become about as common in the handgun world as the Ford F-150 is in the car and truck world. So whether you support the law or not, a ban targeting Glock-style pistols is a big deal simply because of how many people own them. Supporters of the law say it's aimed at a specific problem. Not all, but some of these Glock-style pistols can be modified with illegal devices that convert them into fully automatic weapons. No good. Now, those conversions are already illegal under the law, but state lawmakers say they want to make the base firearms, the legal ones, harder to get. Supporters of the Second Amendment, they see it very differently. They argue the law effectively bans some of the most popular handguns in America. Remember, the F-150 of handguns, and it violates the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding gun owners. Cases likely to hinge on a question that becomes increasingly common here. When does regulating a weapon cross the line into banning one? And that question, well, it's been being played out in courtrooms across the country for years, and now California's latest law headed into that same fight. So whether you think it's a common sense safety measure or a constitutional overreach, one thing everyone can agree on this is the final decision probably won't be made in Sacramento. It'll probably be made in a courtroom somewhere else. And if history is any guide, this one might be climbing the legal ladder for a while. So we'll stay on it. And even though it's in the news now, it's probably not the last time we're going to hear this story. All right, Venezuela. Hit by not one, but two major earthquakes yesterday evening. First one, listen to this, measured 7.2. And then 1 minute later, it was like 6:24, 6:25. Crazy. A second, even stronger earthquake, 7.5. I mean, what does it just feel like? One giant earthquake? The second trembler now being described as the strongest earthquake to strike Venezuela in more than a century. Wow. At least 32 are confirmed dead. More than 700 have been injured. Officials warn those numbers expected to rise as search and rescue operations continue. The hardest hit areas saw, buildings collapsing. It's wild scene from these news stories. Some communities, hotels, were reduced to just piles of rubble. In Caracas, the nation's capital, people ran into the streets as buildings shook, power went out, water mains ruptured, and public transit totally shut down. So rescue crews have been digging through collapsed structures, calling out for survivors. It is just, when a quake this large hits, the damage can obviously be catastrophic. State of emergency has been declared. For now, the focus isn't on government or geopolitics. We got to find survivors. We got to help families. Because in the space of about 60, 90 seconds, an entire country's week has changed forever. And really, speaking of earthquakes, if it felt like when you're reading the news the last day or so that the entire planet must be shaking, you're not completely imagining things. In a span of less than 8 hours, 4 major earthquakes struck in different parts of the world. There were those 2 ones we just told you about in Venezuela, 7.2, 7.5, and then a 6.4 earthquake off the coast of Russia, and then another 7.2 quake just north of Japan. Well, are these connected? Well, probably not. Seismologists say earthquakes happen all the time, all around the world. In fact, the Earth experiences thousands of them every single day. Many are just too small to notice. But man, when they are big like this. And then another article I was just reading about San Andreas, will the fault wake up? Because it's been so dormant for so long. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, let's get into June is one of those times of the year where Supreme Court starts throwing up some decisions. So if you've ever used Roundup to kill weeds in your yard, this story matters. In a 7-2 decision, so not too close, the court ruled that thousands of lawsuits claiming Roundup caused cancer cannot move forward under the state failure to warn laws if the federal government didn't require that warning in the first place. Now, at the center of this is something called glyphosate. It's the active ingredient in Roundup. Some studies and health advocates have argued that it causes certain cancer, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But the EPA has repeatedly said it does not believe glyphosate is likely to cause cancer and has never required a cancer warning label on Roundup products. So that's where the legal fight comes in. Bayer's argument was pretty simple. Look, if the federal government approved the label, states shouldn't be allowed to sue us for not putting something else on it. Well, the Supreme Court, 7-2, agreed. And here's where and why this is such a big deal for farm country where we're at here. We hear this all the time. In fact, a Halter Ranch just got some certification where no glyphosate found in any of the wines. Roundup isn't some niche product. It's one of those widely used herbicides all over on the planet. Farmers, ranchers, landscapers, wine growers, a lot stay away from it, but some still use it. Millions of people have used this stuff for decades, and Bayer has been fighting more than 100,000 lawsuits over it. So this isn't just a court victory. It could dramatically reduce the legal threat hanging over the company after years of billions of dollars in settlements, jury awards. Critics say the ruling makes it harder for people who believe they were harmed to get their day in court. Supporters say it creates one national standard instead of 50 different ones. So whether you see this as a win for science, a win for business, or a loss for consumers, one thing pretty clear. A weed killer you can buy at the hardware store just produced one of the biggest Supreme Court decisions of the year. Now going local, police in Paso looking for a man accused of robbing a bank in broad daylight yesterday. According to investigators, the robbery happened at the Wells Fargo on Spring Street. Police say a man entered the bank, demanded money, obtained cash, and left before officers arrived. Thankfully, no injuries reported. Investigators have released surveillance photos of the suspect, asking for the public's help in identifying Ernesto Noriega Cisneros. And based on a former mugshot and his face tattoos all over his head, he's got like skull tats. Shouldn't be that hard to find. As of this morning, no arrests have been announced. And look, don't bank robberies feel like one of those crimes that should have gone away with like payphones and fax machines? The fact that people still rob banks, it's so interesting because one, you got this building full of cameras, full of witnesses, in this case, broad daylight, middle of downtown, but then you're talking about a crime that often, and I don't have stats right at my fingertips, but I have interviewed people on this before, so I have heard that like bank robberies aren't one of those things that people get caught with all the time. You know, that's why you get some of these ones that who do it and they do it like a bunch and they become like a bandit. So if you know Ernesto or those face head tattoos look familiar, make sure you reach out to Paso police. I'm guessing they would like to meet up with him before he tries another express withdrawal. Back to you in the studio, Richard. All right. Let me tell you the forecast, Central Coast forecast. If you've been enjoying this recent heat wave, I got some news. The marine layer has entered the chat. Cooler temps and more cloud cover moving back into SoCal. Forecasters say they expect them to stick around through the end of June, possibly into early July. That means some of that triple-digit temps that we saw inland, they're going to be taking a break. Around San Luis Obispo, expect highs to settle back into the 70s. North County, still a little warm, maybe mid-80s, low 90s a little bit, but less of the, oh my God, why does my steering wheel feel like my cast iron skillet? A little less of that. Along the coast, Morro Bay, Pismo, Cambria, some more of that June gloom pattern that we're used to. Temps in right around the 60s, maybe upper 60s. Forecasters say the onshore flow is strengthening, which is kind of fancy weather speak for, look, the ocean is reminding us who is really in charge around here, right? Where we live, we get it. All right, I want to make room for our guest today, Paul Solotaroff, an incredible writer, investigative journalist. The story he's on is just awesome. So really want to introduce you to this conversation. First, I want to tell you about my friends at the Mountain Air. Since 1975, over 50 years, they have been helping people get outside, camping, hiking, climbing, heading to the snow. If there's still some left, whatever it is, they'll help you do it. Owned by Josh and Lindsay Herring, who are just incredible people, an incredible couple. They're incredible neighbors, and they're incredible business people. Support local, buy local. Don't go to REI. Check out themountainair.com. Also, a couple doors down, their sister shop, The Switchback, theswitchback.com. Check them out, The Mountain Air, San Luis Obispo.
It's Up and Adam with Adam Montiel.
All right, my guest today has spent more than 3 decades shining a light into some of the darkest corners of our society. As a contributing editor at Rolling Stone magazine, Paul Solotaroff has exposed major scandals, helped free the wrongfully convicted, even given a voice to people who were too often ignored. And now he's the host of The Devil's Quarry, a true crime podcast that started as a wrongful conviction story and then led him to a predator hiding in plain sight for decades. It's a story about justice, corruption, human nature, and the dangers of being too certain we have the right answer when we ain't even close. Paul, I'm so honored to have you here. Thank you so much for being Up and Adam.
Adam, I'm privileged and proud to join you.
Most of us, we really consume true crime kind of like from a safe distance. We listen, we're on a walk, we're in the car, we're doing our thing. But you didn't consume this story. You really lived inside it. Was there a moment during The Devil's Quarry when the story stopped kind of being the investigation? It became something that you really carried home with you.
Yeah, Adam, marvelous question. It actually begins 5 years earlier. So I've been that guy at Rolling Stone for close to 35 years now. broke the Aaron Hernandez scandal. I broke the NFL concussion story. I got the rapper Meek Mill out of prison, helped exonerate 42,000 wrongfully convicted drug defendants in the state of Massachusetts. Many of these shows have gone on to become Netflix or Max or a Prime series, doc series. In this case, I've heard about this horrible miscarriage of justice in Putnam County. So at the time I lived in New York City. Putnam County is 45 miles north of the Bronx. It's this kind of sleepy, half-forgotten community of New York City cops, firemen, sanitation men, Con Ed workers, who moved up there during the white flight 70s and 80s. And they have this kind of monoculture. Everybody's white up there. And what separates the haves from the nots is what usually does: intact families and money. So these two kids who had been wrongfully convicted of the rape and murder of a 12-year-old girl named Josette Wright were very much like the victim in this case. They were all latchkey kids. They were kids of single moms, overworked single moms who had a lot of chaos in their lives and were distracted. And that describes not just these three kids, but their friends, their little community of dropouts and kickouts from school. So they were the kids in Putnam County. They were the problem kids. And when Josette goes missing in the fall of '94, and then her bones turn up in this ritual grave with the clear markings of not just a serial rapist, but a serial killer, fetish items, the elaborate rope knots, the careful curation of her grave as though he visited it. What the cops did, instead of calling experts, calling the state police, or calling my friends at the FBI, Behavioral Analysis Unit 3 in Quantico, instead of doing that, they immediately framed a case around these two stoner teens, Anthony DePippo and his best friend, Andy Krivak. And again, this is a community that has grown up, has been taught to not only respect but trust cops. Problem is that like 74% of Americans, they live in a community where the sheriff is not just the most powerful lawman, he is judge, jury, and hangman. There is no one over his shoulder watching him make the sausage. And so not only do these two kids go away, one for 20, one for 25, before the first of them does this insanely miraculous thing. He teaches himself to read in prison, then he teaches himself to read the law, and then he becomes what his trial lawyer, the great Mark Agnifilo, who got him off in 2016, judged to be the best lawyer he'd ever worked with. Mark Agnifilo, who now represents Luigi Mangione in the trial of the century that starts this September and is rolling off of getting P. Diddy off of 36 of 40 counts for sex trafficking 2 years ago. Mark Agnifilo told me he'd never met a legal mind as sharp as Anthony DePippo, a ninth grade dropout who taught himself the law in prison. Long story short, I went up there to get the second of those two kids out. I succeeded with the help of his lawyers. He got out a couple of years after the story ran. But while reporting that story, Adam, I ran into the devil. And the devil in this story is not some crackpot Satanist, not some self-appointed warlock rather. This is a guy who for 20 years committed the most savage, unspeakable crimes against girls and women in Putnam County and the next county over in Connecticut. And not only did this in plain sight, but did this with the tacit permission of the law enforcement community in Putnam County. And to understand why they gave him that hunting license, you'll need to listen to the entire series. And I'm not sure we get to the absolute rock bottom of that truth. But what we've established, what I came back 5 years later to report, is two things. One, that the corruption in Putnam County went past the sheriff's office, extended out to the Putnam County DA's office, where we uncovered evidence of witness tampering, of subornation of perjury, et cetera, but also to other police departments who looked the other way when this man, Howard John Gombert Jr., committed these horrific acts of violence, sexual violence against underage girls, and was allowed to leave the county, go to the next county, where he reoffended, but was caught almost immediately and sentenced to 30 years. Here's the good news. Those 30 years have kept him off the street. The bad news, only for 25, because in Connecticut, 30 actually amounts to 25, so that this December, Howard John Gombert Jr. will walk out of Connecticut prison a free man with no parole, no probation, no custodial supervision, and he will disappear to the place he has spent the bulk of his free life, which is in the woods. This is a veteran woodsman, a born survivalist who has been living off the grid since grade school and who will reappear at a time and place of his choosing because he cannot stop.
You know, we talk about justice being blind, and it's like sometimes it feels like justice maybe just sees what it wants to see. I mean, you've helped expose wrongful convictions throughout your career. What have you learned about how desperately humans, I'm fascinated by this, how desperately we want closure, even when it's the wrong answer. And you almost think false certainty, it's sometimes more dangerous than just uncertainty itself.
Beautifully said, Ed. Beautifully said. And you're right that there is this kind of, I mean, it's the most human instinct, right? We want to write an end to a story, even if the ending is a trapdoor, is a falsehood. In a place, as I say, 74% of America lives in this place, lives in a rural community without any recourse to justice except that county sheriff. And if that county sheriff is a crook himself, there is no protection, particularly for the weak, particularly for the troubled, particularly in Putnam County's case, for women. So why did they seize upon these two kids instead of focusing on the victim and the man who had been courting her weeks before she went missing in October of '94? It's because those cops, that criminal justice system, didn't give a damn about kids like Josette, a girl like Robin Murphy, who disappeared 6 months later, whose body has never been found. In both cases, the families are left with an open, unsolved murder case. And in Robin's case, don't even have a body to bury. But back to your point, why frame these kids? Why not do their jobs? Because they saw their jobs, as riding herd on these problem kids, rather than, solving what was clearly the handiwork of a serial predator. They just didn't care enough about the girls and women of Putnam County to want to protect them. And as I say, every cop in Putnam County knew this guy. He was the predator in plain sight. And yet they arrested him time and again, let him go. Arrested him time and again, let him go for all manner of offenses. He was a lifelong burglar, second-story guy. And they'd arrest him for those things. But when it came to crimes of sexual violence, they left him alone. And we're now in a position where he has been adjudged to have served his full sentence. And so there is no oversight on this man's movements. And, I've spent so much of my life investigating the pathologies of guys like Howard Gombert, who were clearly victimized at a very early age, sexually and violently. And we know, clinically speaking, that there are men you can work with who have offended and men you cannot. And it largely comes back to when that sexual violence against them was first perpetrated. If it happens before the age of 5 and 6, there is not a thing that the best clinicians, the best drugs can do to turn them around. And in fact, Gombert has expressed not a trace of remorse, not one small gesture toward rehabilitation. In fact, he writes his victims from prison, threatening them when he gets out.
As journalists, Paul, you're trained to observe, not react, but we're also human. And I'm curious, what was the moment in this investigation? And I've been a fan of your work for a long time, so I'm curious, kind of, even after you answer for this investigation, kind of a broad stroke, where in the journey of a story do you stop taking notes and simply get pissed?
Oh, I walk in angry. I started doing this in 1988 at the Village Voice in New York. I was there maybe 2 months as an editor when I started eating my lunch on the West Side docks of New York. And let me put you in New York City in the winter of 1988. It was the very height of the crack pandemic. And New York was utterly awash in homeless children, homeless single mothers, who the city was doing its level best to put up in these horrible SRO hotels, but not support. There were just too many people on the streets. We went from 500-600 murders a year in New York, which is a lot, to 2,700 in those years. And so I see these kids. I'm eating my lunch on these abandoned wharves in the gorgeous fall sunshine, and I see these 10, 12-year-old kids out there half naked while white men in town cars, Lincoln town cars, are driving in circles around them, picking them up and taking them to flea bag motels or to the back seat of their Lincoln to have unprotected sex with these kids. I wound up writing a story called Dead Boys about these throwaway, disposable children in New York City, and it had the unintended effect of bringing down the biggest nonprofit in New York, Covenant House, and its pedophile founder priest, Father Bruce Ritter. Ever since then, Adam, my true north has always been giving voice and face to the voiceless and faceless, and doing everything in my power to get them the justice that's been denied them. When you do that, as long as I've been doing it, you develop two things. One, a very strong antenna for injustice, but also two, this very thick layer of callus around your heart, which enables someone like me to keep going from story to story, doing this over and over again. And, I'd sort of gotten comfortable, even complacent in my distance from, the victims I was writing about until this story. And this story and its surviving victims, these 6 women who told me their stories, and were still broken 30 years later, haunted me in a way I've never been haunted before. And when I got a call from one of them a year and a half ago telling me that monster was being scheduled for early release by the state of Connecticut, I knew I had no recourse but to assemble a dream team of producers, reporters, audio engineers, and put a stop, or do everything in my power, our power, to put a stop to this man's reign of terror. And what this series invites its very large audience to do, actually begs its audience to do, is to listen with their gut and their voices, to join us in demanding not only justice for these two dead girls, but protection from the heat-seeking missile that is Howard John Gomber Jr. So there is a way to keep him in prison for the rest of his life, though he has served his full term in Connecticut, and that is for the Attorney General of New York State to go to a court, appear in front of a judge, and prove to that judge that this man fits under the Sexual Violent Predator Act. Almost every state has one of these clauses. It's an outgrowth of something called Kendra's Law, where she can get him detained for the rest of his natural life at a locked psychiatric facility, thereby protecting the public and also doing the right thing by this community. The other thing we are begging our listeners to do is to demand the appointment of a special prosecutor to go back into Putnam County, but with the full power of the state to investigate from the very beginning the facts of these two cases and others that we have come across in our reporting.
Wow. I'll kind of end with this. It's been a fascinating conversation. Like, I wish it could be like 2-3 times longer. Some people, they see a horrible story, Paul, they look away. You do the opposite. You move in closer. I'm curious, what has your curiosity cost you over the years?
Oh, God, you're the best. It's hard to say what it's cost me because it's given me so much. It's given me a chance to do what I couldn't do as a kid, which is save my mother. I had a mother with severe psychiatric disorders who wound up dying at a very young age. And, when you become parentalized, when you become, that broken-hearted witness, there is this instinct to try and fix the unfixable. And so every time I bite into one of these stories, it has less to do with the suffering than the treatment of suffering, the healing of suffering, the power of justice, the power of restorative justice, financial justice, getting these people tens of millions of dollars or whatever the state is willing to pay to redress its horrific wrongs on their behalf. And so I'm this insane optimist. I continue to believe that light can be made to appear in this funnel of darkness, that, the best minds, the best hearts can join together and demand and bring about something that looks like justice where it hasn't prevailed before. And it is ever renewing. It's a thing that troubles me when I'm not working. I go on vacation after 4 days, I am climbing the walls. Somebody needs a voice.
Yeah. Wow. I can't thank you enough for the time you've spent in your career shining that light into the dark corners, my man. It's and some fantastic work. I'd love to interview you again just over the scope of it. But this podcast, The Devil's Quarry, all the links in the show notes. Fantastic work, my friend. Thank you for the meet and for the time. Really appreciate you being Up and Adam, sir.
Adam, you can book me any day, all day, for the foreseeable future. I so enjoy it.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
was a great chat. So interesting, Paul. All the links in the show notes to everything Paul is up to, all his work at Rolling Stone magazine and everything. You got it, Paul. Thank you so much for being here. Wow. All right, looking forward to Friday. Tomorrow we'll talk to Ronnie Johnston. He's with the Allegretto Vineyard Resort. I want to thank our friends at Moonshiner Collective for being Up and Adam. Original music on the show called Start Again. Stream them wherever. And moonshinercollective.com for the latest. Our show, as you know, recorded at SoCal Studios in the heart of San Luis Obispo County, California. Slow Cal, where the wine is world class. The people are real and life is too beautiful to rush. Returns well taken. Visit slowcal.com. It's SLOCAL.com. Have a great Thursday. I'm Adam Montiel. Thank you so much for being Up and Adam.
Some say life's where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again. Let's start again. We'll start again. Let's start again.